Blessings, everyone. Thank you for joining me. It's a real honor today to have someone that I haven't actually met in person, but I feel like I know him because I've been following Father Michael Lillie on Twitter for probably a couple of years now. So thank you for joining me, Father.
You're very welcome.
Father, you're from Ohio?
Yeah, I serve a parish in Youngstown, Ohio. That's where I reside, just in a little township south of there in Boardman, Ohio.
Well, where are you from originally?
Arizona.
Oh,
Yep. I'm from out west. Was born in Tennessee, but I was raised in Arizona from my whole youth. Went to University of Arizona, so I went and did my undergrad studies in Arizona, and only left to go to seminary.
oh. No, were you born Orthodox or are you a convert?
So yeah, I'm a convert. So I was born into Roman Catholic family,
Oh,
and
okay. Like me.
is yeah. So I was raised Catholic, and not want to say overly pious, but we did the whole, I guess, the whole traditional CCD and altar server and sacraments, and until kind of end of high school, where at that point we just chose, at least I chose, not to really be attentive to my faith that much anymore. My parents weren't very faithful in going, and so we just fell away. But
Hmm.
and after college, after I was married, my wife and we started attending church again, and we really fell in love with the Eastern Catholic parish,
Wow.
and that's got us really acquainted with Orthodoxy a bit through that route, and a little bit of studies and in that, and really taking that seriously. I think that the road generally, if you're honest with yourself, ends in becoming Orthodox.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So Lily, is that French? Your last name? Is it?
Yeah, there's versions of it's actually Scottish, but but yeah, I actually have French ancestry as well, and there's a town named Lily,
That's what I'm
yeah,
thinking.
in France, yeah, but I actually think it's more Scottish than it is French, but
Okay.
there's some overlap there, I guess.
Okay. Okay. The father has a YouTube channel where, and I'll post the link in the video description, where he's got a lot of his sermons, and they're very good. Now, Father, there was also I noticed a YouTube channel for the parish, but some of the sermons on there were older.
Yeah, it was just kind of getting a little bit much to manage too.
Oh,
The 2 pages, so
okay.
we kind of started exclusively just using the one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Now, what gave me an idea of what I wanted to talk with Father about is watching his sermons, and there were a few that really struck me. And one of them that you did was on the demonic. You talked about the particular. I can never pronounce the name of that. The particular demonic that starts with a G. Gar, gar,
The
gar, gar,
the
dar,
the Gargarians, yeah, that happens in the land of the Gargarians. So that's
good.
usually associated with the pigs in our church, which we hear 2 or 3 times a year, depending on the liturgical cycle, where the Gargarian scenes. But yeah, that's just a region, kind of in the northeast part of the Sea of Lake Galilee. That's where Christ had landed and came to do some ministry.
I always liked that particular story from Bible. Actually, in my second book, I started it with that because the guy that is healed goes to Christ afterwards and said, "I wanted to come with you." And Jesus says, "No, go to the town and tell him what I've done." I was like
Right.
that. I thought that was very, very cool. The what speaking of French, I was thinking about the demonic and maybe what people think about it nowadays, or they don't think about it. I came across this quote from Charles Baudelaire. It's kind of famous. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. So a lot of people, I think, Father, nowadays. It's always important that you gave like a sermon on it, because a lot of people like don't think the devil's like real, or the
Right.
demonic is real, you know.
Yeah, that's a very very good quote, and I've used that myself, and
Oh, great.
in my ministry teaching people. Really, the devil does most of his work when thinking that he doesn't exist, that he'd rather not be known. A lot of times we watch these horror movies or read books about the demonic and possession. I know that's very popular type of genre of movies and series where you got the exorcist and comes and has these possessed people, and we see this throughout the gospels where Christ himself has encountered these people. But this is a rarity, really. It's really, the devil would rather us not even know his presence, because then we're not attuned to it.
Yeah. This was an interesting quote I found from Saint, I don't know much about him, Saint Sebastian Dubovich, I think is how you
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah, yeah. It was a great one of the great early priests here in America, in California, in your neck of the woods, really, Serbian priest,
it. I didn't know that. I don't know.
Savovich. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I don't know much about him. Okay, now I have to read more. He wrote, the two men of the Gadarenes were possessed with devils. They were not common maniacs, nor persons with a disordered function in the cerebral regions, for they knew, while the inhabitants of that country did not know, that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. I thought that was cool that he wrote that. So because I think a lot of people think, I don't know, I believe religious people would would believe, I mean, just as they believe in God, I think they would believe that Christ fought the devils and the demons and cured people of possession, that those things are real. But I think a lot of people maybe who are not so faithful would think, well, in the Bible, and I even when I was Catholic, I heard it explained to me, well, people in the Bible who Christ was healing of possession or the demonic, they weren't really like possessed. That was like mental illness, but back then they didn't know about it.
Well, I think so. We try to reason things because we don't understand it. I mean, I think even our you know we try to reason away miracles. Most of us don't
That's
really have an understanding that what a miracle is, and that we probably have never really seen a miracle because we're not in tune to it. That doesn't mean miracles don't exist and happen every day. And same thing with the devil, with evil. Its presence is real. And so I think we would like to just ignore the supernatural because we cannot explain it, and we don't want to admit that maybe we are, that there's not like a scientific reasoning for a lot of things in this world, and there's just not. Some things are just, as Apostle Paul says, we wrestle with demons and principalities, not of this things of this world. That's really our battle is in the spiritual life. We're just not attuned to it mostly when we're going through our day to day, and especially our modern mind. We if we don't comprehend something with our rational reasoning, we kind of just want to disregard it.
Yeah, yeah. I found another, this is a saint that I am familiar with and I like, is Elder Paisios, or could we say Saint Paisios, right?
Same Paisios now, yeah.
Okay. He wrote, this is important. I might be jumping around, but I think it's on the same topic. Is he wrote, demons have their own specialization areas. They tap. Well, I don't know if that word tap is a good translation. It might be poke. They poke a person to find out where it hurts, seeking to identify his weak spots and thus to conquer him. That's something that I noticed too, just in my own life, that I don't think, and correct me, Father, I don't think demons have knowledge like certainly like God has knowledge, but I think that demons are very good at observation, and I think they tend to watch people like St. Paisius talks about, poke people. And I think they know people's weak spots and where they can hit them. So they're very good
Right.
at that because I think demons have like nothing to do all day except tempt people and watch them.
What what are demons? In essence, they're angels. They're fallen angels, right?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
we're all given, especially as Christians, are given guardian angels. And so the guardian angels are there to watch and protect. So even the fallen angels have this capacity. They just watch and they, as you say, they observe. And so they also understand the weakness of humanity is that we become slaves to our passions. And so in observing us and watching and knowing our behaviors, um, they have no power over us, but they can tempt us in ways that they know that our weakness to our passions, our certain passions, where we may just fall for it, and it happens very easily. We are got things that we just kind of gravitate to sinfully wise, just because of our personalities, our dispositions, the way we were raised, the way we were educated. And so they know where our weaknesses are just by watching. And so temptation comes. I mean, this is why we have to be watchful. This is why we have to be mindful. This is what Hezekiah is, we have to be mindful and vigilant at all times, because that's what the demon does. He's very vigilant in watching us. And so if we don't watch our own behavior and know where our weaknesses are, the temptations are gonna come. They're not gonna ever stop to the last breath that we take. And so we have
Mhm.
to be very, 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 very attuned to that. We are fighting a spiritual battle, and that because of our kind of our base, you know, slavery to our passions. That's just reality. We can fall. We can have many falls.
Yeah. I think this will kind of, I think, segue into the what I want to talk to you about, how the devil can tempt us incrementally. But I think especially with like technology and the computer, I think depending on what you're looking at, and I'm not talking about people that are using technology and the computer for things that are good, but I think there's a danger in, like, I don't know if they say surfing the web anymore, but just using the computer to fill up like dead space or boredom. I think that's dangerous because it might sound kind of crazy, but I think you are revealing a lot because I think there are dark forces out there that watch what you're doing. And I think if you're spending too much time on technology, just surfing stuff, that's not good because I think that those dark forces will figure out where your weak spot is. I think that's especially true with men. It's bad for, I don't know what you think about that, Father.
I mean, I think it's a really factual observation.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I, I I think what we usually spend our give most of our attention, really becomes our God. And a lot of times, and where I know I'm certainly guilty of this, is that you spend a lot of time using technology, using the internet, using social media, which we're using for good right now, but can also become, something that becomes a crutch, or something that we become habitual to. And then if we're spending our time on that, then distractions come. And, they it's really hard. I admit, sometimes you use technology for good things. I'll jump on my phone where it has all these apps, and I go to do something, and
Yeah.
there's I have to go for something good, like check my bank statement or do something, and then I'm distracted with something that comes across. It pops up, and down a rabbit hole 20 minutes later. So what did I get on my phone for? Oh yeah, So it happened. I think it's true. It's where it distracts us from the more important things in life. I think it's a really accurate observation. And then we become, especially like you said, men are very we sin a lot with our eyes, and
That's
so
it.
we are very much gravitate to sin with what we see appealing, and raise our passions. And so there's no it's obvious that, pornography is something that so many men, that addiction, is so rampant in the day when it's just click away. It's maybe just an image pops up innocently, and then your passions start boiling over, and then you go from just getting on technology to do something innocent, and you're in the end you're doing something you never even wanted to do, as Paul says. So yeah, I mean, it's true.
But without revealing too much, how big of a problem is like that for guys? Because you hear confessions, Father. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't. I remember when I was Roman Catholic, I heard from Catholics, priests, that was probably the most thing they heard from guys was.
I think there is not a person that has been victorious over that passion on the internet. If even if you are a really faithful person, you're going to get caught up with that at some point, maybe in your life. Maybe just innocently, be it on the internet, you will see imagery that is impure, and that'll bother your conscience. And some people have been, we're especially if you're going to a public school, a government school, you're going to be exposed to things very early in life.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And by other people that maybe don't share the values that you share. Hopefully, that Orthodox kids are being taught, and it's going to be a problem from the very beginning. It's a huge problem. Yeah, it's a to answer your questions, is a very common confession that you will hear, and some people have more of a problem than others. Some of it is just a casual, fall every now and then, and some people are just addicted to it, and it is a big problem.
I want to go back to that too a little bit.
Yeah.
The thing about the demonic and the devil is that I think people, because I didn't believe in it, you know. So when I wasn't religious, because I spent a lot of time where I wasn't part of any organized religion, and I kind of feel like people don't believe, but I think when if they ever come to a point where they're like near death, I think they might believe. And that happened to me. I found this cool quote from Saint, I wasn't familiar with him either, Saint Macarius the Great.
Yeah.
And he wrote, when the soul of a man departs from the body, a certain great mystery is there enacted. If a person is under the guilt of sin, bands of demons and fallen angels approach along with the powers of darkness, which capture the soul and drag it as a captive to their place. No one should be surprised by this fact, for if, while a man lived in this life, he was subject to them and was their obedient slave, how much more when he leaves this world is he captured and controlled by that man? Because, man, I never read this. I haven't really read anything like that in Roman Catholicism, but I don't want to talk about me too much. But when I was getting out of that bad life I was in, which was the worst kind of life you can imagine, is it I had, well, it wasn't like a near death experience, because I know Father Seraphim Rose talked about that, and those things can be kind of goofy. But I was in, it wasn't a near death experience, but I was in a hospital very, very ill. And I think I was near death. And this is exactly what I experienced, is that I sort of perceived that like demonic forces were coming for me. So I think what Saint Macarius is saying is exactly true. If you don't, you better live right and do what's good in this life, because at the end, these things are going to come for you.
St. Macarius is he's one of the early Desert Father saints, and we get
Wow.
the basis of what I don't, not to get, it's the toll houses, we get a essence of the
Right.
toll houses, from what he's teaching here on how when we die, we'll be, the angels come for us. There's a biblical basis for that. If we look at Luke 16 and with Lazarus, the rich man, the angels, take the soul at death. And so the angels are really what are going to be afflicting us because they're going to be reminding us of the things that we did in our lives and whether they're confessed or not and cleansed before God. And so, I think all of that will come to us. And he gives us, St. Macarius, if I'm just going from memory, he tells us what the soul does at different stages during that 40 days as it ascends to judgment for the particular judgment before God.
Mhm.
And that's, the angels will be accompanying us in those 40 days. So yeah, it can be a very difficult transition for us if we live the profligate life and without any regard to the afterlife, and then that we do have to face a judgment. And so
Yeah.
yeah, and that can be quite, I'd say, very scary. Death is not. It should be really a rejoicing thing. It should be something that we're going home, when we depart this world. But because of our sinful life, I think that becomes obvious at our, as you say, when you have maybe getting closer to death, it becomes kind of dreadful. That's why we call it dreadful judgment, because we got to stand before God, and everything will be revealed. It will be.
Yeah. I've known some like they're kind of it sounds like extreme examples, but I've known from like some hardcore sinners who who it kind of took that much of a jolt for them to wake up. So it's kind of like, but not everybody would get that chance. Maybe, if you're living a bad life and something happens and you just tip over to the other side and it's too late. But I think it's interesting that I think some people are so hard-headed, it's not until almost the very end that they see
Mhm.
what's true. It's our people are hard to convince. I think especially with stuff about this, it's tough to get them to accept it. So
Their hearts are hard like Pharaoh.
exactly. Yeah, that's not a good way to be. Now,
Yeah.
I wanted to go into this other talk about you in one of your sermons. You talk about the I don't know. I have problems with that
Incrementalism.
word. Yeah, how incrementally the devil. I thought this was really important because I haven't really heard anybody talk about it in much or really at all. And I was like, well, Father gets it because I saw that work out in my own life. That there's little steps that you take on sort of a path to evil. And I wrote down a couple examples. I was like, well, nobody wakes up one day and shoots up heroin. It starts out incrementally. They might start drinking when they're younger, or then they're smoking grass, or they're doing something else. It doesn't or no one like one day starts looking at like the most sadistic, perverse forms of pornography. Usually they're looking at other things maybe that seem more, innocent, or more or less harmful than that. But it happens incrementally. So I thought that was an important point you made, and especially like I think perverse people work this way too, because I know that some people who've been abused, although that's not always the case, some people are abused very violently, but sometimes groomers, that's the way they work. They work very incrementally, and then that's part of the strategic sort of incremental steps they take. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Father.
I think I hope I'm quoting the right saint, but I'm pretty sure. Again, Saint Paisios, Mount Athos. He would
Hmm.
say, if the devil came at us all at once, we would resist. We would put up a fight. We would feel his presence and say, okay, it's time to go to battle. But if he just comes, a little bit where we don't perceive it, and a little bit more, it's kind of like that boiling frog
Yep,
analogy.
that's it.
You throw a frog in a hot water, it knows it's on its way to death. But if you put that frog in lukewarm water and heat it up slowly, it doesn't realize it's on its path to death. It just dies eventually. And this is, I think, how evil, how the devil would preferably work. And um, if we look at our society today, it certainly has gone that way. I think it's moving at a really fast pace now, with regard to how people reacted. But it just took a couple things for us to tolerate. Always starts with that tolerate in our society, in our lives, and then it gets larger and larger where things that were truthful say 50 years ago, and we just accepted it as that's just the way it is. This is the truth. This is God's way. Now it seems backwards, and that if you believe those things, you're a bigot, you're crazy, you're a fundamentalist. However, I did a sermon this past Sunday, and where Christ calls he kind of rebukes the father with the the possessed son, and the apostles couldn't heal him, and he comes and he accuses the apostles and wants his son healed, and he tells the father, and then along with the apostles and all the disciples there, and the witness of this miracle and this healing. He says, you're a perverse generation. How long will I have to be with you? And I wanted to go look at perverse. What is this? I know in our common parlance, it's someone that maybe that is just, I don't know, do things of perversion, these horrible, uncouth, behaviors. But really, perversion, and I looked it up, and so I could do a sermon on it. It's doing something contrary that is not right.
Mm. Mm.
That's the actual definition of it. And I think that is what happens slowly. We do one or two things that we know that are not right. And after a while, we just kind of come to believe, oh, it's nothing bad happened to me. My life is just fine. Doing this, and we tend to start making these choices again in our lives to do more things that we were taught were wrong. But we think we have better knowledge, and then we become a perverse person, a perverse society, because we continue to fall away slowly, one decision at a time. Just the slippery slope is a real argument, and it truly is. Everyone likes to say, just because we do this one thing doesn't mean the whole society. It really does. If you just go look in my life, I'll be 45 soon, so I'm not an old man, but I've seen enough in my short time. When I graduated, from the time I've graduated college to now, it's a wildly different place, and what we accept is acceptable behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm 10 years older than you, Father. I always point to same-sex marriage. That did a flip-flop.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, if you go back about, I don't want to say 20 years, but let's say 30 years, the vast majority of people were against it, and now it's flip-flopped, and the vast majority of
Mm-hmm.
people are for it. And there's a lot that happened in between there. I think you had the very slowly in pop culture, especially in the 90s, you had the normalization of homosexuality, and then here we are. And I think the Christ can heal all those things, God willing. And then I want to end with that. But I think people become sick, and I think just like when people abuse their health in a certain way, it takes time, and I think people, well, I got this little quote from Saint Basil the Great. He wrote, "Hell can't be made attractive, so the devil makes attractive the road that leads there." I thought that was a great quote, because like I said, I don't think people want to become drug addicts. I don't think they want to become porn addicts. I don't think they want to live a life that is damaging them physically and mentally. But I think slowly they slip and slide into it. And I think a lot of times the first step that is actually going to take you down seems kind of innocuous. Like I watched a program, or I watched a music video, or I saw an R-rated movie that was had a large amount of sexual content in it. And I go, well, you would think, well, it's okay, but later that takes you down that road and you become numb to that stuff. And it starts, I think, young, and I think it starts sometimes people think kind of innocently. So, I mean, I grew up in an age where Playboy magazine was thought of as kind of mainstream, not a big deal. You
Hmm.
know, the barber, if you went to the barber with my dad and they had it on the tables there for men to look at while you're looking to get your hair cut. So,
It's quite the barber shop you went to. We had race car magazines in my,
no, I mean, I'm sure they had like Popular Mechanics and Sports
yeah.
Illustrated, but they had Playboy too,
Wow.
you know.
Well, I think a lot of it, a lot of the beginning of everything, I think it starts with, when as the influences in society upon people start so young, and then we're not formed enough to know completely right and wrong, and we get tied in, for young people. For people that are a little older, I think it's a form of escapism.
Mm.
They want to escape the realities of the world because they don't have any real purpose in their life. And I'm sure we're going to talk. Hopefully, we'll talk about that, what that purpose is, and what,
Yeah.
and that path. But so they escape things, maybe the monotony of life, maybe the loneliness of life, maybe they feel a little not connected with people in this world, and in any real, life manner. There's a ton of that going on, and so they'll turn to other things. They turn to pornography, they'll turn to drugs, they'll turn to alcohol,
Mhm.
they'll turn to bad relationships, and it's all a matter to escape the situation they're in, and perhaps they think they can control it in the beginning, and they start small, and then incrementally things just fall even further down into the abyss.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird because I remember I haven't looked at these things in years, but I remember when I was in high school and like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition would come out. And I mean, that's something you could just buy at the grocery store. And what looking back, I mean, what you saw in there is what like Playboy would have had in the 1960s and
Sure.
70s. So
Yeah.
it's like what was considered mainstream got so much more severe. And now I can't imagine because I see like I don't watch this stuff, but sometimes you can't help it. But what passes as mainstream entertainment right now, when I'm older than you, but even when you,
Yeah.
father, would have been considered pretty raunchy back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think even if the ratings on the movies and such,
Oh
a
dear.
PG, yeah, a PG-13 movie that you think is all right for your young kids, your young, at least your teenagers, is really what a rated R movie was when I was young. So it is, yeah. Well, just goes to show that society has changed. I mean, you can see that even in our politics today, or uh, abortion and homosexuality, and
Mm.
say drug use. All this is like a good majority of people think this is okay now. A majority, Christianity is a minority. We are less than 50% of this country, and even at that, those people that claim to be a Christian, they're not faithful, or practicing in a real manner. And so it's a wonder that the propaganda of let's just say it, of the evil one is winning people's hearts over and their minds over.
Yeah, I agree. So what this is kind of how I'm going to try to wind this down and thread everything together, hopefully. What, and this comes to the bigger topic of like healing. So what has all this, wrought? I think a lot of, because I've always been interested because I was born and grew up in San Francisco, which was the home of the sexual revolution, and I was born in '69 when all that was going on, and I grew up in the '70s. I've always been interested in the idea of freedom and sexual freedom and what that all that stuff actually means, and I don't think people are happy as a result. So I was looking at some CDC stuff. 1 in 10 Americans 12 and over take antidepressants. Antidepressants um, are higher among women. And by the way, between 2016 and 2022, prescriptions of antidepressants increased among young women by 130%. So, I mean, I thought this was interesting because women during the sexual revolution were supposed to be, especially the people, and then you had the women's liberation movement, they were supposed to be freed from all these things. And
Mhm.
so they should be doing better, you would think. And you would also think like LGBT gay people should be doing better because they've got gay marriage and they've been, liberated and out of the closet and they have sexual freedom and all that stuff. I looked at two studies. So in the Netherlands, which was the first country to legalize same-sex marriage, let's see, here it is. Despite the Netherlands' reputation as a world leader with respect to gay rights, homosexual Dutch men have much higher rates of, oh gosh, I can't read it, Father, of mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and suicide attempts than heterosexual Dutch men. And then the other one was from Sweden, which is very pro-gay. Among same-sex married men, suicide risk is 3 times greater compared to opposite sex couples. So all that freedom hasn't worked out. Let me give you a couple of quotes, Father. So this one's from Father Seraphim Rose, who knew a little something about the sexual revolution because he was there in San Francisco when it was all going on. He wrote, "Sexual freedom is the coupling of words that represent totally incompatible realities. Since sex practice today is slavery, is but another instance of that modern incompetence to do anything but follow one's passions and accept whatever vulgar slogan justifies its aims." Wow. Real quick. This is from St. Justin Popovich, who I don't know much about, but when I read stuff that he wrote, I really like it. He wrote, "In truth, there is only one freedom, the holy freedom of Christ, whereby he freed us from sin, from evil, from the devil. It binds us to God. All other freedoms are illusionary, false. There is to say they are all, in fact, slavery." And then just the last one from the brothers Karamazov, which is like my favorite book. "The world has proclaimed the reign of freedom, especially of late, but what do we see in this freedom of theirs? Nothing but slavery and self-destruction." So I just thought that was interesting. People, I think, are very unhappy with all these newfound freedoms, and they're on a lot of antidepressants. And I think like these men, and well, Dostoevsky's not a saint, but well, neither is Father Seraphim Rose. But Saint Justin Pafovich said is that all that slavery just leads to slavery. Go ahead, Father. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
Well, it's okay. I mean, I think you make very good points, and it's all factual that you backed up with, studies and by good writings from venerable people. I think it goes back to what I just said not too long ago that we have to understand our purpose in life. That it is to have communion with God. Without communion with God, our life is rudderless. It has no meaning really. There's no meaning in anything. Uh, with a purpose in God, comes meaning to even our suffering. Has a purpose and a meaning. We gain something out of that, and so without that knowledge and that direction in our life, we're always going to find ourselves always grasping for something that's always moving. Happiness is a moving target. Earthly happiness.
Mm.
You're going to grab onto it, and then it's going to dissolve in your hand, and you have to go and grab onto something else. And so people are always going to be on this chase for some kind of temporal pleasure, temporal happiness, and it's never going to be satisfied. You're never going to be able to satisfy that. And so you got to look to the eternal, to God, the one who created us, live by his purpose, and look for communion to him if you're going to want true peace in your life. And that peace will come even when you're going through difficulty, because you know that there's meaning there. You know that in the end that there's going to be a reward for your struggle and for your obedience and for your faith. And you can find peace in that. You know, we pray the Lord's Prayer that it's not our will that we seek to have, but God's will, and that we are commanded to take up our cross, follow Him, and in doing that, then we gain our lives. So I think what we have is a greater society that is post-Christian. I know that doesn't mean Christianity's dead. It's certainly not, but we don't live in a world that is guided by Christianity anymore. I don't know any country that we can see fully Christian. Even our historical Orthodox countries have been tormented by the various revolutions and persecutions that the people there are not all guided by their Christian faith, their Orthodox faith. So yeah, so we have to live. We have to just understand that we're a minority, and then this is why we have a whole society of people that are turning to whatever what pleasure they can get in at the moment in order to find some kind of happiness, but it's going to leave. And this is why they're using drugs such as you said, the SSRIs, the antidepressants, which only tend to mask things for a little bit, and they're not going to be, if they're not a long term, they're just not long term going to help you. Only Christ can do that, and that's going to be found in the church. And it's sorry, I'll do my rambling now. And it's only in the Orthodox Church that you'll find this real true therapeutic healing. Like, this is where the therapy is. And if you want to go to a doctor for a prescription, you don't need that. You can come to the church for a prescription. God's grace abounds there. His physical energies, we can partake in them. We can have them within us. The services, the sacraments, living according to his will in the church. These things are healing, and it maybe take a while to heal from some of the sin and the passions that we have suffered from. They're diseases. That's really what it is. They're diseases that we've inherited, in some cases that brought upon it by our own self. But nevertheless, they need healing. It's in Christ has done that and given the church as the hospital for us to do that. It's not going to be found anywhere else in another faith, not any other denomination of Christianity. They don't understand that. And you go to a Protestant, even a Catholic, they understand sin. They understand that we're bad people and that in God came to fix that. But, you're just supposed to have hope that, God took care of it all. But yet we still have people go and living their life normally in full and not well, not as Christians. And we have the once saved, always saved crowd that don't even go to church because they feel like they're saved already. This is a work of the devil. You feel like you're saved, that you don't have to go to church and worship God. You can meet God on your own terms instead of his own. So it's only in the Orthodox Church. Everything else is just confusion. You may have some kind of relationship with Jesus in another denomination, but you don't have the full revelation of him. You don't have the full truth. And so your healing is going to be very limited.
I agree. And the devil, or the demons, have even worked incrementally in those other faiths. I mean, I saw it in the Catholic Church because I was especially involved with a lot of this stuff dealing with same-sex attraction. And I never, when I came into the Catholic Church in 1999, I never thought that they would one day bless same-sex couples, but here they are, and they're doing it. And I'm sure a lot of Catholics will think, oh, there'll never be gay marriage, but I don't know at this point, because I think they kind of crossed a weird threshold. And
I think they crossed that 70 years ago.
wow,
When they chose, I mean, we've been out of communion Orthodoxy in Catholicism, Roman Catholicism for
thousand
a
years.
millennia almost, uh, but it was just about 70 years ago, that they cognitively chose at that Second Vatican Council, we're going to radically change our faith. We're going to modernize it, and and that was a choice then, and that was when you make that choice, that's Pandora's box. You open it. It's immediately saying we're open to reform, we're open to change, and that's what they opened. That's what they chose back then. And so you just seen it. I think decade after decade get more progressive. And yeah, I don't know how that would stop at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. The other thing I wanted to hit upon, just a couple of points before we end, is I think in America, I think freedom is good. Like freedom of speech is a good thing. But I think freedoms can be problematic, like unchecked freedom, especially in terms of can lead to licentiousness. And I think, and you talked about religion, especially the Orthodox Church. And I think this is where people, and you talked about a post-Christian culture. I think this is where people have gotten into so many troubles because freedom, when it's unchecked by religion, it, there's no stop gap there. And I think that's where people have destroyed themselves because
Well, turns into debauchery and barbarism. They don't see that, but they don't see how far they've fallen.
yeah,
St. Paul says that all things are permissible, but not all things are edifying. We may have the freedom to do things. That doesn't mean it's good for us. And
yeah,
I think religion, especially here in America, as you point out, regardless if it was an Orthodox society or not, it was all based on most people had the same values. They had Christian, a Protestant Christian value nonetheless, but it was a value that they all held together, and that kept society uh, all together. So our freedoms that were granted to us. No one really went outside those bounds unless you were, on the dredges of society or some kind of criminal activity. But those values kept our society kind of cohesive. And now that we have a lack of any religion, and for the vast majority of people here in this country, I think you're right that people don't know where the limits are on their freedom.
none. And since becoming Orthodox, because I was raised Catholic and then came back to the faith, but I've noticed that Orthodox really gets under your skin, but in a good way, and this might sound stupid or trite, but the devil's in the details. And in Catholicism, you don't even have to fast on Fridays anymore. It's not required. Now, during Lent it is for 40 days, but the rest of the year, no.
Yeah.
It's not. There's some hangers on that still do it. But in Orthodoxy, there are a lot of things that are still required. And I think that's important. It might sound stupid and trite, but I think it is important because it just grounds you in the faith in just everyday things like, okay, Wednesday and Fridays, I'm going to fast. And then there's a lot of other fasts, like we just did the Dormition fast. And you need that stuff. And I think when Catholicism dumped it, that was bad. That was super bad. So,
Well, it certainly gives us a discipline in order to be able to put checks on on our passions. When we're fasting, Christ says, if you want to have a faith that moves mountains, we need to have prayer and fasting, and we need to take it serious. So the church puts these prescriptions, again, this therapy, this prescription, so that we can get stronger and grow and get healing, but and overcome the temptations of the devil, who we've talked about quite a bit here today.
mm,
Catholicism, it's just a different breed now. Again, it's progressive. They've made, even in our church, we allow, like, we have these prayer rules, we have these fasting rules, and there's a certain amount of pastoral guidance that for certain people they may not be able to fulfill those, and we make kind of pastoral decisions one on one with certain people. But in the Catholic Church, what happens is they make the exceptions become the rule. If one person's going to be given an exception, they got to make that like, okay, well, this is the bare minimum, and everyone just follows that. That's what happens. We're in Orthodoxy, that's not the case. You may hear people online say it's the case. Oh, my priest says it's okay. No. When someone is given some kind of a pastoral application to their faith because of a need, that's for them. That's not for all of Orthodoxy. And so keep it. We're very idealistic in that. We have a high ideal, maybe an ideal that the vast majority of people may not be able to attain, but we keep the ideal because it's important to strive for it. If we bring it down to where everyone can reach it, then we no longer are growing. We're just not.
You guys didn't, the Orthodox didn't, you also didn't streamline the liturgy. Now, I didn't grow up with the Latin. I'm not picking on the Catholics, but it's my point of reference is that I didn't grow up with the old Latin Mass, but when I came back to the church, I went to it. So, you would have like an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes depending on the sermon, 2-hour liturgy. I mean, that sounds a lot like the Orthodox Church. But I mean, in mainstream Catholicism, you can go to a Sunday Mass that's 45 minutes.
Mm. Well, I'm sure that, and sadly, I'm sure the people in the pews probably tend to like it better, because that's what their faith is boiled down to. Is just an obligation to get the service done, right?
Yeah.
I attended
Yeah.
on Sunday.
You know what else was hardcore, Father, when I came to Catholicism, because the incremental like dumbing down of Catholicism too, is it you used to have, well, in the Latin Mass, you used to have like the Orthodox from the night before you don't eat on Sunday, but then they did it 3 hours. But now in mainstream Catholicism, it's just an hour, which is ridiculous because you could have a donut before you leave. And I've talked to people, on Sunday, you could literally have a donut before you leave for church. And then by the time you receive communion, it'll be like an hour. So it's dumb. But I think that's part of it too, is that I think, and I know it might sound like I'm picking, but I think those little things are important. And I think they help you to 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 keep a kind of discipline in your life. And I think people need that. They need it. And it's good when you're in a community, because I don't survey people at my church like who's doing this or who's doing that. But I know a lot of the people there are very serious about their faith, and I just see them live it. And it's good when other people are being disciplined, that it's very good. So
Well, it's these things keep us accountable, and that's the other thing that we have with the I mentioned the sacraments is with this healing. How do we fight the devil and these temptations in our lives? That is just that we have to be accountable, and confession is a part of that. Having spiritual direction from a confessor is part of that, and we need to have that accountability because we're going to fall. As we mentioned, there's a lot of temptations, and that we're going to succumb to. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. That is the reality. We're going to have a fall, and we need to be able to confess those, be absolved of it, receive the medicine, the healing, the absolution, and be able to not be ashamed to come again and again and to confess these things so that we may be healed. We have to be accountability is big, and I think you don't have that in maybe some other churches to the degree that we have, in our Orthodox faith. It should be, and if it's not something that we have people doing, it really needs to be a regular thing.
yeah. One last thing, Father, because you mentioned it, and it stuck in my head. You talked about Orthodoxy being therapeutic, and I never thought of my old religion, Catholicism, that way. And just in terms of like going to confession, it was called penance, and I always thought of that as being a sort of a penance, because you were received a penance. And one of the things even the priest at my parish tried to explain is that the Orthodoxy look at that differently, is it's a type of therapy or like
Yeah.
medicine. Because I would always be like, I do my confession and I'm waiting for the priest to give me my penance. But I think the advice that they give is much more paternal and fatherly. It's very good. It's kind of like how you would imagine when the prodigal son returned to home
Mhm.
and his father. It's very good. Not that they excuse you if you're doing bad stuff, but I think it's more grounded in a type of therapy like you were talking
Well,
about.
it's not, uh, it's not an exchange of, I pay to, in a sense, I'm going to do this to, for my sins. Here you go. I committed a sin. Now I make a payment for it and I'm absolved. That's kind of what it is. Okay, you said your confession. Now go do this, and you're good with God. If God wants that, what does God want? He wants our hearts. He wants our love. And so we need to admit our lives, and we have to fix our lives so that we can be more better disciples of Christ, so that we can have bigger hearts to love him and our neighbors around us. And by doing that, we have to change what we're doing. And so we need advice on how to do that. And so our penance says, maybe, hey, why don't you try this prayer? Why don't you do
Mm.
this rule? Why don't you, not do this? Why don't you, hey, not take communion for a week or two, and really think about things in your life that you're not doing right, and get really have some deep contemplation. These are things to make us grow. They're not an exchange of, God, I sinned, here you go, get me off the hook. I pay basically my bail money, and I go on to the next until I have to come back and confess again. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's much different. It's much different.
Yeah. One other thing, I don't keep, I'll keep you here all day, Father. But one of the things when I became, and I became Russian Orthodox like you, is that I thought, and to be honest with you, I thought it was nuts, is that confessing once a week. Because when I was Roman Catholic, I would confess probably once a month, and people thought that was kind of a lot. But I thought that this frequent confession stuff was uh, not necessary. But now that I've now that I've been Orthodox for it's going to be 2 years, I really see the wisdom of it
Mhm.
because it really keeps you on top of your game. Because
Accountable.
yeah, because I've noticed, and I don't want to talk about myself too much or have pride, but I've noticed that I I live a much cleaner life.
Yeah. So yeah, I know. Yeah, I know you came into the church in the Russian church abroad, the Rokor, and
Yes.
so they've inherited the pre-revolutionary tradition of this weekly. If you want to take communion each week, you'll confess each week. It's not exactly like that in Russia today, but still you need to confess before you have to, as part of your preparation for communion. So maybe that's, priest will give you, hey, I'll come in a couple weeks or once a month, but it's a frequent thing. It's a frequent enough thing. And
It can't be years.
yeah, it cannot be. It needs to be something. It's like going to the gym. Those people who go and prepare for communion a lot, are attentive to their life. Maybe they don't need a weekly confession.
Yeah.
Maybe they can go a little bit further, but but they're good. But those are the type of people who want to come to confession,
I,
because they
yeah,
know
I
how
do.
important it is. You know, so it can't be infrequent. It has to. And I know that that's not universal in our Orthodox church, though. I think we cannot possibly be people who are good at offering our contrite hearts to God, confessing our sins, if we're doing it so infrequent once a year. We are calloused at that point to our sins. We've done it so much, we've forgotten so much. And so we're not, and we're going to keep doing it because we're not accountable. Some people are ashamed and afraid to go to confession. I assure you that there's no priest that's going to look down upon you. In fact, I'm emboldened by my faith for people who are sincere in confession. It brings me to tears to see their faith, before God. I look upon those people as people that energize me and make me a stronger priest because of how they confess their souls to God. And so there's no priest that is ashamed of it. Just
Hmm.
and the only way to get good at confession, people say, I don't know sometimes how it is you just got to do it more often. It's like anything in life. The only way you can get better at it is by doing it more
Hmm.
frequently. So but I do think the Roman Catholics, I think maybe even before even you're a little older than me, but I remember my mom and my grandparents say they had to always take they had to go to confession before communion. So I think it's even a practice they had. It's not something that we made up. It's an old practice, and of course they've again progressed away from that, and maybe even some of our Orthodox jurisdictions have done that. But yeah, frequent confession to the degree that your confessor wants you to is very important.
Yeah, in Catholicism, if you go to confession once a year, you're meeting
Mm-hmm.
the bare minimum
Bare minimum. Yeah.
requirement. I mean, it's I don't know if they would say it's an idea, but if you just go once a year, it's okay. You're okay, which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But one thing about what you said too, Father, about the priest is that yeah, I did a general confession before I became Orthodox, so my priest heard it all, and I never got any kind of sense of
Oh.
judgment from them. But I think kind of that goes part and parcel. This isn't our topic today, and I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to drag keep you here. But I think that goes part and parcel with the married priesthood. I think in Orthodoxy, I think there's more of a fatherly, paternal kind of I think attitude that priests have in Orthodoxy.
And we
And
generally have a different kind of relationship with our parishioners. We stick around a little longer. It's more of a,
exactly.
it's not so professional. There's this bond. You say a fatherly bond with them.
Yeah, yeah. How did you become a priest, Father? Because I know it works. I guess it works a little differently in Orthodoxy, where I guess you're chosen out of the. Because it seems like in Catholicism, a young man will just come forward and say, "Well, I want to be a priest," and
Uh,
they send him off to seminary. But I guess it works a little differently in Orthodoxy.
Well, I think it's more and more I'm seeing that's how it's working, even in Orthodoxy.
Oh, really?
Uh, what,
Okay.
I had the inclination to do it, and I wanted to become a military chaplain. My father
Yeah.
was 25 years in the Marine Corps, and
Cool.
so I always wanted to serve, but I didn't serve. And so I thought that, well, heck, I know that there's not many Orthodox chaplains. Maybe that's something I can get into. And I had served in the Air Force as a reserve chaplain for about 10 years.
As
Kind
an
of
as an Orthodox?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
So
how did you originally become an Orthodox priest? Did you just want to become a priest?
so I with a lot of trepidation, I talked to my parish priest about that, and um yeah, and so I got a blessing through him and through the it was in Archbishop Carrillo out west, because I was in Arizona still,
Wow.
to go to seminary, and I felt in every way unworthy of doing it. I felt like I don't know why they let me go, but I just because I asked, I don't know. So they probably saw that, I had an earnest wish to do it, and I was very active in the church. So I think they were okay with me doing it, but I didn't feel like I was. Always thought like I went to seminary without any guarantees, and it's true. No one said I was going to be a priest. They just said, "Okay, you go to seminary." there was no, there was no like, "Okay, we're going to make you a priest or a deacon." There was no talk about this. Just go. You got a blessing to go to seminary, and so it was a kind of a wild experience where I was just there trying to learn on how to be the best Orthodox I could be. I failed a lot at that, but in learning the traditions of the church and learning some kind of pastoral wisdom that maybe I might be able to use it someday. But it happened. When you try to live your life for the glory of the Lord, sometimes you have to be an advocate for yourself, and just express to your confessor what you're thinking, and if it's God wants you, he'll get his man.
Mhm.
He'll select you, if the conditions are right. And we made a lot of sacrifices. God bless my wife, she made a lot of sacrifices
Wow.
for this to do. I considered not just my ministry, but it's her ministry because she's allowed me to do it, and she continues to do a lot, to take care of the family so that I can serve the church. So it's wasn't an easy road, but yeah, I was even bringing the topic up, like you say, Joseph. I was like, I don't think this is supposed to be. I think I'm just supposed to be selected just one day. I thought that was some kind of like some myth, of just, oh, we need a priest, and here you go. I think maybe that happens. I think in there, it used to be kind of a caste system in Russia, believe it or not.
Mm,
The priests, married priests, and their sons would be the best trained,
mm,
obviously. And so you would see a lot of this happening where it became kind of like a family thing where
mm,
children of priests become priests.
mm.
And so you'll see that if you read the histories, Russian history of the church, that was quite common. So
Do you think somebody would have approached you eventually about being a priest or a deacon? Were you already a deacon or?
no, I wasn't a deacon. No.
Okay, okay, okay,
So
okay.
I don't know. I,
Mm.
I I think at least in our it depends. I think different jurisdictions do things differently, and there's certainly needs for priests everywhere. Um,
Maybe
but
some, yeah,
I wanted to serve the military as a
uh,
chaplain role, and so I needed to go to seminary for that and get ordained at some point. So that was kind of my route, that I was found myself into the priesthood, but parish ministry became something that I kind of did and stuck around with since then.
well, maybe some people need a nudge, but you didn't really need it. Maybe God was giving you the nudge. So.
Yeah, well, I think you can bring it up to people. My whole path was I'll bring it up, but I don't want to. I'm not going to continue to knock down the door. I know that goes opposite of what sometimes the gospel say with prayer, but I didn't. I figured if they thought I was worthy of such a thing, then they'd help me. So I think it's okay to ask. If you're asking me for people to advise for people out there that have an interest in, maybe
Wow.
they have a calling, it's okay to express these things to a confessor, to your parish priest, and see what their advice is and what they think about you doing that. And that's okay. Yeah, I
That's
don't think
good.
you have to be like, hey, I think it's not going to be something where God comes down by his hand and plucks you out of the
Yeah,
congregation. I don't do that. That's not going to happen.
yeah, yeah. One last thing, Father, is it you're like very good on Twitter. You're very you're very truthful. You get any put in a good way. You get any pushback, Father?
Yeah, always. Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did. I just had a pastoral counseling meeting with a newer catechumen, but he's a catechumen not of my making, but of someone else, of another priest. But he's traveled a lot. He's traveled a lot and been to a lot of priests, a lot of well-known priests in America. And he kind of gave me, I think, he expressed like how different personalities of priests are out there that he expressed, and some that he really appreciated. And he says, he says, "Well, I find you just very even keel, Father." And I thought it was, thinking, that's, I kind of deflated, at first. Like I'm not, I'm not a big personality kind of. I thought maybe I thought I'm more bold than I actually. I think of myself more bold than I actually am, probably. But I think it was actually a real good compliment because I do think that orthodoxy is the royal path. And
Hmm.
in the royal path, we have to avoid the left and the right, two extremes. We can become too extreme on both ends.
Yeah.
And the reality is that when you are in the middle, you're gonna get, pushback from people on the
Hmm.
extreme sides.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
I
So it's
think it,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, thank you, because I think it's important for people to hear the truth because sometimes it's kind of like common sense or it's some kind of like a basic truth, but you don't hear it very often or you don't hear it from people who are courageous enough to say it out loud. So, like when you do it it becomes kind of extraordinary. So thank you for doing that. And that's how I noticed you, because I
Oh,
thought, wow, this priest is like brave.
oh,
He's got courage. So thank you,
oh,
Father, because
oh,
it's not something you see all the time, unfortunately.
well, glory to God. It's all thanks to God for his glory.
Thank you. Father, could you offer me a prayer, or anybody that's listening? Do you mind?
Sure,
Oh,
absolutely.
great. Thank you.
I wish God's blessing upon all those who are in need of God's presence and healing. May He move you to grow closer to Him in your walk with Him, and know that He loves you more than you can even love yourself. That He is there with you, near you at all times. If you can just calm yourself, pray, and realize that His presence is near, and may you have peace and a heart full of love for Him and your neighbor.
Thank you, Father.
The Lord God bless you. Thank you for this great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Father.